This is Jodi with Alltruecrimeasmr. And tonight I'm going to be rereading One on One by Michael Kelso because the last final chapters that I did is not uploading. And that was 5 days ago. So I'm gonna break it up into 2 parts so I can get it out to you. Warning, sensitive material, nobody under the age of 14, please. And if you could like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. It would help the channel out a lot. And if you could comment anything, emoji, whatever, that'd be great. I would really appreciate it. So here are chapters 34. Probably do 30, 40, 1 or 2. That way I can add a little bit of the bonus. Maybe I won't add the bonus tonight because I don't want to hold this up any longer, because I really want you to hear the rest of this story. It is awesome. It really does get incredibly intense and very intriguing. So sit back, relax, and smile. Take a deep breath and exhale. Let all the stress of the day just disappear while I read to you. The last few chapters of One on One. Chapter 34. Raymond stewed in the patrol car while Stevens and another cop laughed at his expense. He buried his face in his hands and did not look up until they were back at Larson Prison. The news of his escape and capture had reached the prison before them. When Raymond was escorted inside, all the officers looked like they were trying not to laugh at the greatest joke they had ever been told, while the inmates hung their heads as if it were a funeral. A few days later, all of those officers involved were fired, and attitudes radically reversed. The inmates acted like it was a holiday, while the officers sulked around with rage in their eyes, daring any inmate to laugh in their face. However, Raymond sat in the dark RHU cell utterly alone. He couldn't sleep. His coughing first kept him awake. His ride in the freezer truck landed him a low-grade case of pneumonia, but medical refused to see him. He was left to suffer through it. His only human contact was 3 times a day when an officer shoved a tray through his cell door. He made a mental note never to complain about the prison food. The nights here were dark. The only light that filtered into his cell came from a bare Soren just slapped his knee. Don't worry, kid. I'm not gonna hurt you, Emil said. Raymond eyed him suspiciously. You're an inmate. Inmates try to escape. Our job as officers is to stop them. His countenance changed in a heartbeat, and his voice was like gravel crunching under the weight of an 18-wheeler. 3 of my officers failed to do that job, and I have you to thank for that. Raymond backed away from him. 3 of my officers who have ruined their careers, who won't be able to provide for their families, who brought shame to this institution. Emil's speech slowed. You could feel the pressure in the air like the onset of an impending storm. 3 officers who could be facing criminal charges, all because you were being selfish, all because you didn't feel like paying for your crimes, he whispered. Emil rose to his feet. His eyes were unfocused as he thought he wasn't in the room. As though he wasn't in the room. He towered over Raymond, fist clenched, face red, looking as though he were a volcano about to erupt. What stopped him? Raymond was not sure, but for a moment he stood still like a robot, then had to pause and reboot. And just like that, he came to his senses. It's not your fault, though, Emil smiled. Nothing is ever the fault of an inmate, right? I mean, everyone here is innocent, right? Your victims had it coming, right? Emil turned toward the cell door, then stepped. Besides, we all have something to laugh about now. Maybe we could get you in one of those books about the world's most stupid inmates. I mean, all of the houses to stop at. He started laughing. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was more like the evil chuckle of a predator toying with its prey. As the door slammed shut, Raymond started thinking about how to tie slip knots into his sheets. Slip knots into his sheets. Chapter 35. Chapter 35. Warden Alton Randall Bennington III. That's what the nameplate on his... Chapter 38. As proclaimed, the nameplate was oversized, perhaps to compensate for its owner's physical shortcomings, and quite impressive. It personified Alton in more ways than he realized. Although he boasted a puffed-up resume, appeared politically impressive, in truth he was an oversized paperweight, a figurehead, a puppet ruler whose primary claim to fame came from taking credit for the hard work of others. He sometimes felt that he was taken advantage of. He was taking advantage of Captain Soren. He got to go to all the political functions, benefits, and dinners. He extolled the virtues of a strong correction system while building his own political status. See, it was the perfect situation for him. Yet, something wasn't sitting quite right, like an itch between his shoulder blades that he just couldn't reach. Soren. The name wormed into his brain. He tried to shove it away, but it niggled its way back in, burrowed deep Shut your mouth. A sign that checks in will be fine. Emil leaned in and lowered his voice to a menacing growl. Remember, Alton, if I go down, I'm taking you with me. Soren turned and left without another word. Pennington was shaken, even trembling. He pulled out the half-empty bottle of cognac and poured himself another large glass. How did it come to this? How could I have been so blind? He knew the answer, of course, but admittedly he had let someone take advantage of him. That was a difficult pill to swallow. He weighed his options. One, I turn a blind eye and keep enjoying the perks while letting a monster roam loose. Two, I fight. I try to make a difference. Or three, I give up and slink away with my tail between my legs. He knew what had to be done. He just did not feel like ending his career. 2 days later, Emil called to the warden's office. He was in the middle of filling brown boxes with his personal possessions. So you're giving up, are you? He said to Alton with an arrogant smirk. That's good, you have more time to spend on your political career. The veiled threat was not lost on the warden as he continued packing. Do you have anything for me before you go? Emil asked. Like what? Like the file you keep on me. Don't think I don't know about it. Alton tried to keep a guilty look off his face. And if such a file existed, why should I give it to you? Emil stepped closer. Because you're not out of this prison yet. And all kinds of bad things happen to people in a prison. Most times they do not even see it coming. Alton looked up at the sheer size of the man, and then he looked into his eyes. I never noticed the coldness there, he mused. I never saw the monster. Was he always like this? He reached into the file drawer and pulled out a large file. I'm not sure I should. He started, but Emil snatched it out of his hands. He opened it up and looked through it. It was all there. Every write-up from his file, testimonies and interviews implicating him in several illegal activities, including one-on-ones. He smiled and turned to leave, but then stopped. He looked back. Enjoy your retirement. I hope the next warden has a little more spirit. And he left. The warden said, I hope so too. I hope so too. Chapter 36. 87 miles from Larson Prison stood the maximum security prison at Cressman. It was a modern, top-of-the-line facility, but it still had problems. Lieutenant Duff shouted through the door for the second time. Get back over to the cell door and cuff up, inmate. Cyril Chatham stayed where he was, kneeling in the corner with his hands covering his face. His body was lurching as though he was praying while sobbing into his hands. The lieutenant used pepper spray on Chatham a second time. He sprayed the back wall, hoping that some splatter might hit him in the face. He waited for a moment or two to let the spray take effect and disable Chatham. He gave the order again, sprayed more, and then waited. The inmate continued kneeling and covering his face. 5 officers in helmets and body armor stood behind the lieutenant, awaiting his command. He sprayed one more time, waited 30 seconds, and then gave the order for the team to secure the inmate. As soon as the door opened, everything changed. Inmate Jatham jumped up, wheeled around, and started laughing. He had baby powder all over his face, making him look like a deranged ghost. The lead officer ran in with a riot shield, trying to pin the inmate against the wall. He did not notice how shiny the floor was. Jatham had dumped shampoo all over it an hour earlier, anticipating this moment. The officer slipped and went head first into the wall, knocking him unconscious, and out of the fight. Jatham used this to his advantage, standing on top of the downed officer for direction. The second officer tried to secure him with handcuffs. He managed to get one cuff on his wrist and tried to pull his arm into submission. Hold. However, Jatham had anticipated this and had a dozen pencils wrapped around his wrists under his sweatshirt. He slipped out of the cuff, turned around, and cuffed the officer. Lieutenant Deft realized it had been a setup and Jatham was playing possum to draw them into his cell. Things were quickly turning in Jatham's favor. Deft had to act quickly. He was not in body armor, but he charged into the cell with the last 3 officers in the team. He sprayed OC in Jatham's face as he came. Jatham merely wiped it off, the baby powder, and felt no effects. Depp realized this would have to be done in the hard way. The officer in front of Depp stumbled over the unconscious bodies, and then he received the toe of Jatham's boot right under his chin, underneath the protection of his helmet. The kick was worthy of a pro football player. One more officer down. The remaining officers and Dev tackled Jatham and tried to get like restraints on him. He kicked Dev up, but Dev recovered and buried his knee into Jatham's groin and then placed leg restraints on him while he was doubled over in pain. They rolled him over and Dev kneeled on Jatham's neck while the officers cuffed him. Jatham got up and spat in Dev's face. Dev wiped it off and said, "Take him to RHU." As they were taking him out of the cell, the officers accidentally smashed Jatham's head into the cell wall. No, Dev shouted at the officers. "He has been secured. Take him to RHU without any incidents. The officers complied. Once he was in the cell, the nurse came and examined his injuries without incidents. Afterward, she returned to the infirmary and examined the officers on the extraction team. As the nurse was finishing up with Lieutenant Depp, he was called to the warden's office. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Depp asked. "Yes, please, come in. Have a seat." "Come in, have a seat." Warden Staten said, "I wanted to talk to you about your performance." Depp was somewhat abashed. "I take full responsibility for the team's actions, sir. Jatham was well prepared for us. I know that's no excuse, but we did secure him with minimal damage, if any. Discipline needs to be handed down. I should be the first to receive it." Statham stopped him. "I know what happened. I know it wasn't your fault or your team's fault. He set you up with an ambush. As far as I'm concerned, you did what you needed to do and what had to be done." Depp relaxed a little bit. "Then why did you call me here, sir? Are you happy working here at Cressman Prison?" "Yes, sir." "Have you thought about anywhere else?" "Not really, sir." Sir, I would never try anything against you. You taught me all I know in being a lieutenant, about being a lieutenant. Calm down, Michael. I did not mean anything subversive or undermining. I know you better than that. I simply mean, have you ever thought about being a warden? I'm sorry, sir. I thought you meant, no. I trust you implicitly to have the best interests of everyone in mind and to perform your duties with the utmost integrity. A look of concern passed the warden's face. Well, that's why I almost hate to speak to you about this. A warden friend of mine is having trouble at his prison. It's more than he can handle, and called me for help. I'm flattered you would think of me, sir. You won't be when I tell you where it is. Dev hesitated. Oh, no, not. Yep. Larson. Dev's face fell, but only for an instant. Then he said, if you think I can handle, and if you think I can help, I trust you, sir, and I will do my best to be a good lieutenant at Larson. That's great, but I'm not asking you to be a lieutenant. I'm asking you to be warden. Dev's mouth dropped open. Sir, I don't know what to say. First of all, you can say yes. Yes, of course, yes. Good. Second, you can stop acting like I've done you a damn favor. Larson is the worst prison in the state. You have a lot of work to do. I understand that, sir. I'll do my best. I know you will. That's why I recommended you. Now I will give you one piece of advice that I've always believed in. Give the illusion of knowledge, even if you're not sure about something. Never let that be seen. Not by your staff officers, and especially not by the inmates. Taking suggestions is fine. But in the end, you be the one to say, this is what we are going to do. If you make a mistake, do your best to fix it. But always show strength, because others will draw strength from you. I know this is a lot to ask. Do you think you can handle it? Yes, sir. Chapter 37. just show me to where my office is and I can wait for him there. I'm not sure if the captain wants... What did you say your name was? Oh, Patrice. Well, Patrice, why don't you show me to my office, or you can sit in the unemployment line. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. An hour later, there was a knock on Warden Teff's door. Come in, he said. Emil strode through the door, trying to look as imposing as possible. The warden was looking through papers and did not bother to look up. Can I help you? I'm Captain Zorn. Teff looked up from his papers, eyed Emil up and down, then said, Captain Zorn, please have a seat. Yes, sir. I wanted to familiarize myself with the staff here. So tell me, Captain, what are your goals for this prison? How do you think we can accomplish them? Well, sir, my goals are the safety of my people, keeping inmates in line, and making sure that every inmate gets what is coming to him. Those goals can be accomplished by letting me do my job my way. I see. So you see no improvement needed here? None. Thank you for your time. Zorn recognized the dismissal, rose and left. Warden Teff stared at the door. This is going to be a challenge. Colton startled awake. He looked up to see four faces obscured by riot masks and feared for his life. He wondered at the identity of the man behind the masks, but a half-decent guess could tell who they were. Colton looked into the eyes of the tallest one of the four and mentally exchanged a silent question. I thought we had a deal. The man gave him a knowing look and turned away as the team quietly surrounded the bunk. Colton closed his eyes and braced for the inevitable. But all he heard were muffled shouts. He opened his eyes to see Raymond being carried out of the cell, bound and gagged, with the bag over his head. The tallest team member closed the cell door and looked at Colton again before catching up with the team. Colton leaned back into his bunk, feeling relieved. Then guilt crept upon him, and then eventually overwhelmed him. He covered his eyes with dry washcloths that slowly became wet as he thought of what Raymond was about to go through. When they took the bag off Raymond's head, he was cuffed to the little metal chair. Captain Zorn was standing directly in front of him, tapping his baton into his palm. Why am I here, sir? Raymond asked. His answer was a baton across the jaw, nearly breaking it. You're here because I thought I brought you here. I wanted to have a little chat, and lying to me would be the most unwise thing. What did you tell the warden? About what, sir? About me. The program about anything? Nothing, sir. I don't believe you. The baton whistled through the air, impacting with Raymond's kneecap, shattering it. Raymond screamed in pain. I didn't tell him anything, he said through the pain. Zorn looked dubious. I thought you would lie to me, so I invited a few of your old buddies to talk to you. Out of the shadows came three men. Raymond recognized two immediately. The was no mystery, considering the other two. They were former officers. Grace Stroh and Stevens. They stood around him, each carrying a baton. Raymond said nothing, and neither did they. There was no need. They would do all of their talking with their batons. These officers, Zorn said, scratched that these former officers wished to share a few complaints with you over the careers you stole from them. Then he struck a blow to Raymond's head with his baton. Raymond nearly blacked out, not even feeling the next several blows that rained down on him. He knew better than to struggle. He just tried to curl up as much as possible and take it. His body was withstanding the punishment until he felt the first vertebrae crack. He lurched forward and tried to cry out, but a baton smashed into his mouth, knocking out several teeth. Raymond tried again and again to plead for them to stop, but every time he did, they grew more enraged. Raymond realized that he would not be leaving this room alive. He began to flash one scene at a time. Every time the baton pummeled him, crack, he was born. Crack, at 9 his mother left. Crack, at 11 he stole his first candy bar. Crack, at 12 he had his first trip to juvenile hall. Crack, at 17 his father died. Crack, at 22 he committed his first armed robbery. It finally sunk in. He had truly wasted his life. And for the first time, he felt remorse. But it was too late. Raymond's life ended at 31 years, 4 months and 23 days in Larson State Prison. The officers were in such a bloodlust rage that they continued raining blows on the corpse, only when they realized that it had been some time since Raymond had reacted to the assaults that they finally stopped. They backed away in unison, each covered in blood, and stared at the lump of meat in the chair that didn't even resemble a human body anymore. Stevens dropped his baton, fell to his knees, and clutched his chest. The other three grabbed him and took him to the hospital. The hospital staff asked lots of questions. Emil answered them all, saying that they were slaughtering a pig when Stevens collapsed. The doctor on duty was not convinced. He called a friend who happened to be deputy sheriff and explained the situation. Really? Covered in blood? He asked. Yes. Would you mind coming over and checking it out? I will be right there. Chapter 38. Chapter 38. Warden Teff, in his apartment watching The Shawshank Redemption, being a bachelor. He had every excuse to let the place get messy, yet the apartment was meticulously clean. If sparsely decorated, he simply refused to let things go. If there was a job to do, he took care of it chance to get out on the floor. Much. The captain kept him buried in paperwork that he said was urgent. However, Duff was beginning to suspect that Emil did not want him to see or even go through the rest of the prison. He took time to scrutinize the personnel files of all the prison employees, paying particular interest to the officers who had been recently fired. He studied the names of pictures of each one involved, including Raymond Perry. He tried to interview Raymond 2 days ago, but he just was not talking. It seemed odd to have such a sense of fear instilled in a hardened inmate. This made him even more curious about the case. His attention was drawn back to the here and now by the end of the movie. He got up, stretched, and headed to the bedroom where the phone began to ring. Hello? Is this Warden Teff? Yes, who is this? Yes, this is Deputy Collins with the Larson Sheriff's Department. What can I do for you, Deputy? Teff said, stifling a yawn. Well, I'm down here at the hospital. I got a report of 3 men bringing in another man complaining of chest pains. Okay, that sounds pretty standard, not really worthy of a report. I would agree, except all 4 men are covered in blood. That would warrant investigating. Forgive me, Deputy, but what exactly does that have to do with me? I was getting to that. The doctor said one of the men was wearing a Larson State Prison uniform. Oh, Duff's blood turned to ice. Are you sure? The doctor is absolutely sure. Can I speak with him? He just went off duty. Can you give me his phone number? Silence on the other end. I'm not sure, Collins said slowly. I don't think that would be a good idea while I'm investigating this incident. Duff's breath got in deep and released, calming him. Look, I'm going to need to launch an investigation of my own, and you're giving me nothing to work with here. I have nearly 400 staff members, plus it is possible that one of my 1,200 inmates could have stolen an officer's uniform. I'm talking about the security of my prison and your town. Collins hesitated. I can give you the name of the patient. Stephen slowly opened his eyes. The pain medication made him groggy. He remembered a dream about being tied down and people in blue gowns cutting him open. He tried to orient himself by looking around the room. It was bright, but had no decoration. A curtain hung in the middle of the room. It smelled like disinfectant, and the constant beeping of machines was distracting him. His eyes fell on a large man sitting in the chair beside his bed. He flinched involuntarily. Good morning, Mr. Stevens, Warden Teff said. You gave the doctors a bit of a scare. Not everybody survives a triple bypass. What do you want? He croaked. Not much, he said, leaning back in his seat. Just a few words and one straight answer. I can give you as many words as you want, most of them having 4 letters. That wasn't very polite now. How polite am I supposed to be? The man who took my job, he rasped. No, Raymond Perry took your job. Or more like, you gave it to him. He's the one you should have thanked. Or is that what you were going prison, thanking him personally. Stevens looked away. That's what I thought. You know, I've changed my mind. You're already given me my answer. I only need 2 words from you. I can guess that Mr. Orkey and Mr. Stroh were 2 of the people with you. I only need the name of the last person. Stevens turned back towards Warden Devon and smiled. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Thank you for that cliche, but yes, I do. Right now, I'm dealing with you, Dev said, standing and towering over Stevens. And you are dealing with murder charges. Is your anonymous friend placed high enough to get you out of that? You can't prove anything. Please, Dev said, I have a dead inmate, and I have Orkey and Stroh. Let's see if they are as devoted to keeping the mystery's man's identity a secret. I have also kept this a local investigation for now. All I need to do is pick up the phone, and it becomes national news. You can't. What about my family? That's up to you. Stevens pondered his options. I can't, he said quietly. He will kill me. Dev leaned in until he was an inch away from Stevens' face. Who says I won't? Stevens looked at him in shock. Dev turned his attention to the many machines that were plugged into the wall, attached to Stevens by myriads wires and tubes. I wonder what this does, Dev said as he pulled a plug out of the wall socket. What are you doing? Nothing, he said with a mock innocence while pulling out another cord. Stephen watched in horror as the lights on the machine faded. Stop! Stephen screamed. I don't know what you're talking about, Dev said. Nichols, his name is Nichols. How long has he been an officer at the prison? I don't know. Nobody is supposed to know anybody else. We aren't even part of the group Nichols called us. Why? Plug my cord back in, please. After you tell me what you know. I could die. Well, then you better talk fast. He nervously looked at the dangling plug. It's a shadow justice group led by one man, Nichols. He calls a victim of an inmate. He calls a victim of an inmate housed in Larson that he's been having trouble with and invites them to exercise true justice. And what does that mean? He has the victim come in after hours and give them talk about how being the time to avenge themselves for the injustice that's been done to them. And then they walk in the room, torture the tormentor, and Nichols is clean. He gets his troublemakers taken care of without getting his hands dirty. I told you what you wanted to know. Now plug my machines back in. Dev smiled as he turned away and walked away. Hey, Dev stopped. Don't worry. These machines run on batteries. They're fully charged. Thanks for the info, though. Stevens watched through a mask of anger as Dev walked out the door. He reached for the phone and began to dial. Yes, he fell for it. Good. Now, what about my hospital bills? I don't have insurance anymore. Soren knocked on his door. "Come in," Dev said, a little more gruffly than he'd intended. "You called for me, sir?" Soren asked, looking into the stacks of files littering the office. Dev looked up at him with blurry eyes. "I'm trying to find someone. I know a lot of someone's. Could you be more specific?" "Nichols." Soren chuckled his tongue. Soren clucked his tongue and shook his head. "If you're looking for Nichols, you've got your hands full," Soren said. "You know him?" "So you know him?" "I know of him. No one knows him. He's like an urban legend, a ghost that disappears as soon as you look his way." "So he's just fiction, then?" "On the contrary, he's real, but no one has ever caught him." "Why not?" "Because he's more than one person." "How is that possible? I've spent years investigating one-on-ones. Every time I get close to the truth, it evaporates. I've had that camera in room 114 fixed several times. It breaks mysteriously every time there's an incident. I believe there's a shadow group within the prison that knows the inner workings and disappears when they feel someone is on to them." "So it's impossible to catch them?" "No, I would not say that. I've come close several times. The real problem is any time someone gets in trouble, they blame Nichols. It's tough to find someone who's invisible. So how do we make this invisible and visible? By kicking up a whole lot of dirt." Dev thought quietly for a moment. "Captain Soren," he said, "I'm hereby authorizing you to use whatever personnel and materials necessary to track down and expose this group." "I'll do my best, sir," Soren said on his way out the door. Emil had a difficult time keeping his car on the road on his way home. He was laughing so hard. The shakedown that followed was one of the largest the facility ever had, and the toughest. Inmates left and right were going to RHU for breaking rules that had not been enforced in years. RHU filled up overnight. Angry inmates complained and threatened to sue. The captain responded to each one with the same message: "Talk to the warden." The warden was inundated with requests and grievances. To his credit, the warden backed the officers in every inmate complaint. He answered them by saying that these rules had been in place for a long time and choosing to enforce them was perfectly legal. The officers were skeptical at first, but once things started improving, they realized that the warden really cared. They were impressed with the support and the backing they got from the warden. He even went a step farther in going to each shift briefing and commending the officers for a job well done. He started spending more time on the floor, talking to the officers about problems with the facility and what could be done to solve them. At first, Emil was secretly amused by the whole thing, but then a nagging thought burrowed into his brain. What if the officers actually started believing in Dev? He might find a weak link. Not only had he failed to make the warden look bad, but now some of Emil's officers are starting to buy into Dev. One day the warden was on the floor, touring when he went into central control. He exchanged idle chit-chat with the officer, then he noticed a dark image on one of the monitors. "What's wrong here?" he said to the officer, who suddenly looked nervous. That's the broken... that camera's broken, sir," sir. Can I ask you a question? Ask away. Do you really care about what goes on here? Does it look like I care? Yes, sir, it really does. That's why I asked the question. The warden grinned. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be here. Yes, sir. And what's your name? Neil Redland, sir. The warden took out a little notebook and wrote in it. Then he smiled and said, "Keep up the good work." He returned to his office, looked up Redland's file, and found he was to be impeccable. He wasn't off the radar type, never got into trouble, was a good officer, came in and did his job, then went home to his family. A totally boring file, just the way Dev liked it. He filed the name in the back of his mind and went about his routine. A week later, he was on the floor and went into Central. And noticed the camera was still not fixed. As maintenance been informed about this, the warden said, "I'm not sure, sir. I'd have to check." The officer replied. He nodded and started to leave, pausing for a moment. "Is Officer Redland working a different post today?" Dev asked. The officer squirmed a little. "He doesn't work day shift anymore." "Since when?" Since 5 days ago, sir. He was transferred to evening shift." "Transferred by whom?" "The captain, sir." The warden stayed late today. He went to the Central about an hour after shift change. Redland stiffened as soon as the warden walked in. "How are you?" Deb said. "Just fine, sir," he said briskly. I got moved, I see." "Yes, sir." "How do you like it?" Redland did not answer. "Were you asked to come here, or were you ordered to?" "Look, I do my job, sir. Is there anything else? I'm rather busy," Redland said. "No, officer, there's nothing else. You have a good shift tonight." "Thank you, sir." Then the warden started to leave. "Excuse me, sir. You dropped this." Redland handed him a small slip of paper and shot him a knowing look. "Thank you, officer." He quickly put it in his pocket and left. It wasn't until he was in his car halfway home that he opened it. It said 555-2938 after 12:30 a.m. And that was all it said. Dev sat in his chair, nursing a scotch and water while an obnoxious infomercial played on a television. He drummed his fingers on the arm of the chair, checking his watch every couple of minutes, cursing the second hand for dawdling. Will 12:30 ever get here? Finally, he dialed the number. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail, not feeling like it would be the wisest thing to leave a message. He hung up and tried again in half an hour. Again, no answer. across from him, trying to keep his composure, said Captain Zorn. What happened? Dev asked. As close as I can tell, one of the members of the team was with Nichols. But why Redlin? Maybe they thought he was a threat. He had requested a move to second shift, so I put him on an extraction team so he could get a feel for how they run their team. Never in a million years did I think it would turn out like this. You shouldn't blame yourself, Captain. Sometimes things just go bad. Maybe when we review the tape, we can find something out. The tape, Emil said, starting to sweat. Yes, the videotape of the incident. Oh yes, I forgot to bring it. We'll go get it, Dev said. I've got some time. Yes, sir, Emil said, heading to his office. He got a blank tape out of his desk drawer and then went to RHU, the end of the hall. The last cell farthest away from the officer's station, where they housed the worst of the worst. Inmate Haig went into the cell just yesterday. Emil peered into the filthy, darkened cell. Nice digs, he said. A mountain of shadows stirred in the corner. What the hell do you want? The shadow asked in a voice that sounded like a gravel truck. I came to check on you, to see how you are. Unlikely, the mask said, lumbering towards the cell door. Look, I took care of your snitch. Now, what else do you want? I bought you a present, Emil said. Nick was intrigued. He looked towards the door and saw Zorn holding a small videotape. Okay, I'm guessing this isn't a porno of your wife and of you and your sweet ex-wife. No, it's the extraction record of you assaulting Officer Redlin. Hank looked at the tape and licked his lips. So what do I have to do? Take it and destroy it. He walked over and picked up the tape. What is it? That's it, Hank said. What's the catch? The catch is we have to make it look good, Emil said to Hank. He grabbed his radio. All officers to RHU. Hank glared at Emil with rage in his eyes. You set me up. Officers arrived and Hank's cell door was opened. Immediately ensued as 5 officers tried to subdue Hank, but he threw them off one by one. Emil charged and tackled Hank into the wall, but a nasty blow to the back left Emil lying on the floor. Sig fought off the other officers. When Emil recovered, he grabbed Hank from behind in a headlock. The other officer, seeing the inmate was distracted, tried to rush him and push him to the floor. As they did, he fell sideways, hitting his head on the way. Emil felt the snap and Hank's body go limp. Medical to RHU ASAP, Emil said into his radio. The nurse arrived in 2 minutes, and after a quick exam, the officers carried Hank to the infirmary. Emil was left alone. He looked around the demolished cell and noticed the videotape lying on the floor, miraculously untouched. Emil stomped in the tape over and over until it was in pieces. Captain Zorn reported to the warden's office. Came a call over the radio. Emil stumbled into the warden's office and collapsed into the chair. Warden Dev stared in shock at the bruised and disheveled captain who had left his office in immaculate condition not 20 minutes before. What happened to you? Dev asked. I miscalculated. I got the tape like you asked, but thought I could get some information out of an inmate egg if I showed him that I had the tape as a trump card. I'm thinking it didn't go so well. Not so much. No, he grabbed the tape from me. That's when I called the officer so he could get it back. his office, locked the door, closed the blinds. Sitting behind his desk, a slow grin crept across his face. "I'd like to thank the Academy," he said, before bursting into laughter. Chapter 41. And this will be the last chapter for tonight. Or at least this video, so I can get it uploaded. "You requested to see me," Emil said. "Yes, sir, Captain Zorn. I wanted to apologize for my previous actions." Harley said loud enough for the other inmates to hear. "You're right. I promise I won't give you any more problems, sir." Emil eyed him suspiciously, but merely said, Good, and turned and walked away. "Hold on a minute," Harley said. Emil turned back and glared at him. Harley quickly added, "Please." "What do you really want?" Emil snarled. "Okay," Harley said, so that only Emil could hear. "I put on that little show to give you back the respect that I took from you with the inmates." Emil relaxed just a little. "That's appreciated," he said quietly. "I wanted to talk to you, not inmate to captain, but Harley to Emil. Okay. When you and I were kids," Harley started, "you beat me into submission and told me I needed counseling. I realized you were right, and it changed my life. Now as an adult, you beat me into submission again. Only now it's my turn to tell you that you need counseling." "For what?" Emil demanded. "Don't you see the hate and rage that's consuming you? This conversation is over. You have to get this under control before someone else gets killed." Emil lunged at Harley, grabbing him by the throat and bit into the wall with a loud thud. Harley grunted in pain. "I will not be lectured by some stinking inmate," Emil screamed. Harley stared into Emil's eyes. There was no trace of the good person he used to call friend. "I'm sorry I wasted your time." Harley croaked. Defeat and sadness overwhelmed the physical pain. Emil released him, then pulled out his notepad and jotted down Harley's name. "Sleep well," Emil growled. "You and I have an appointment tomorrow." Harley rubbed his neck and whispered a silent prayer. The next day, 11 a.m. Harley sweated out in the morning, knowing that Emil would just not forget about it or let it go. He knew that another beating was just around the corner. As if on cue, 2 guards showed up and told him to pack his stuff. This is new. Maybe they'll take my things straight to the infirm to save time. He packed and they escorted him down the hall. He briefly entertained the thought of escape, but knew it would only be worse when they caught him. He was so lost in thought that he did not realize they were not going to room 414. They turned down another hallway and ended up in a room with a cage. A bored-looking guard handed him a box with his name on it, pointed to an open door, and said, "Change." Harley started putting on his street clothes. What kind of game is this? Is he going to pretend I'm escaping and shoot me? Harley's anxiety rose by the minute he came back out of the room and was met by another officer. He took Harley out of a different door, which led outside to a fenced-in tunnel. The officer stopped at the door. Harley turned back and towards him. "Am I supposed to wait for you?" "No, you're supposed to walk." He pointed down the tunnel and Harley started walking. When he got to the end, the gates opened for him. He slowly walked to the other side of the gate. Looking at the guard tower, none of them seemed too concerned about him. They were watching him, but had their rifles across their chests. Instead of pointing them his sports jacket. He was leaning against an unmarked police car, smiling. Harley let out a sigh of relief and walked over him. "Give me a heart attack, why don't you?" Harley said. Jack looked over his bruised arms and broken nose. "Well, it looks like someone hasn't been playing nice with other children." "You have no idea," Harley said as he collapsed in the passenger seat of the police car. Jack hopped behind the wheel. "Well, did you find out what you were looking for?" "Unfortunately," Harley said. 12 hours later, Warden Duff, "There's a call for you on line 1. "Thank you, Patrice," he told his secretary. "Hello, Warden. This is Officer Richardson of the Larson State Police. I wonder if I might have a little bit of your time." "Absolutely. I want to be in good standings with the local law enforcement. You can set up a time with my secretary." "Well, actually, sir, I'd like to meet outside the prison if that's all right with you. I'm rather busy. Meeting here would help me out. I can't. Some of your officers might recognize me, and I'd like to avoid that." "Oh, okay. Where would you like to meet?" "There's a small cafe about 20 minutes around south of the prison called Mom's Kitchen. Do you know it?" "Yes, I've been there." "Good. Can you meet me in an hour?" Dev said, flipping through the schedule. "I guarantee you need to see what I'm going to show you." "Okay, I'll be there. Thank you." 58 minutes later, they were both seated at the booth. Officer Richardson slid a manila folder toward Dev. "Read that and tell me what you think." A young woman who appeared barely out of her teens approached the table, and Dev scanned through the file. She had black fingernails, hair that could not decide if it was purple or blue. Each of her ears were full of piercings as well as her lips. Harley wasn't sure, but it almost looked like she had horns beginning to grow out of her forehead too. Both men stopped and stared at her, wondering what she could possibly want with either one of them. What can I get for you fellas?" she said, pulling out an order pad. "Just coffee for me," Duff answered, then back to his reading. "I'll take the big breakfast plus a steak, medium well, and an extra plate of bacon," Harley said. "Well, sure thing," she said, winking at Harley. "Hasn't anyone been feeding you for a while?" Duff said. "Well, your prison isn't exactly known for good cooking or second helpings." "What do you mean?" "Keep reading, it's all in there." Duff read as Harley's food came. His eyes got wider with each successive page. "This cannot be." "Well, unfortunately it is. I witnessed it with my own eyes." "What?" Richardson looked a little embarrassed. "I was recently a guest in your prison," he said. "I was sent in undercover to investigate reports of corruption." Dev sat back in his seat and eyed Richardson. "So I'm under investigation." "Well, everyone was under investigation, but you were cleared. As was most of your staff," Richardson said. "It was just a few individuals and one in particular." After reading the rest of the report, Dev closed it the same way someone closes a book that just completely changed his outlook on life. Dev eyes were unfocused, staring off into the distance. "Are you alright?" Richardson asked. "Sorn is Nichols." "No, I am not